They're blameless.
Theme tune playing. Hello and welcome Australia to the BAP. My name is Franco. Joining me are fascists, leftists, wage slaves, and you name it. Jason and Dean, welcome.
Thank you.
Which, I mean, some of those aren't that. Wage slave, obviously true. Leftist, true. Why a fascist? I mean, Jason's.
I'm just, well,
a little bit
I'm,
blonde
it's
blue
more of a collective of who's listening or who isn't listening.
Ah.
So, I mean, if you want to attribute yourself as a fascist, I'm not going to stop you, I mean.
Well, someone's got to make up that quota in this group, and I think Dean's the one.
Well, look, we're both skinheads, Jace. Okay, so let's just split it 50.
But I'm looking at your Google Hangouts image right now. You've got a very much El Ducho look about you. So.
I think that's a picture of me with Davo's sunglasses on after he left him at the house. It's like just mocking him because it was a sunny day.
So,
Well,
are we,
that's a pretty
gentlemen?
fascist thing to do as well, then, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe.
Well, I, for one, am good. I'm doing a studio check. One glass of wine. Check. Present. I'm good. Yourselves?
Franco
How-
check, wine check.
I've got to remark on just how antisocial we are now that we've immediately figured out the technology for doing this all separately. We've just completely opted out of getting together on a Sunday.
It's totally. I would have. Like, as I was explaining to you before the show, I would have gone, were it not for the fact that I was playing video games and not paying attention to the time. And 20
which
minutes
point-
ago, I realized we had a show.
At which point I admitted exactly the same thing.
Yeah, it's not through lack of intending to go. It's just through basic laziness and incompetence.
I agree.
It's a group laziness because only just got home 5 minutes ago and I thought better check if the show's even happening.
That's the kind of work ethic you get here at that.
Wasn't it? Was neither here nor there about the whole matter.
Oh, good. I don't feel so bad now.
That is the love I have for this show. Well, I'm going to put it on the listeners because they're not there, so why should I care? So yeah, I'm deflecting.
Oh, yeah, it's the children who are wrong.
That's exactly right. Blame the victim, Franco. Blame the victim.
It's the white farmers, Jace, all over again.
So
Yeah.
culture check. What have you boys been doing in that regard besides playing video games?
Well, I see that's just the point. I was remarking about how suddenly my internet here, without actually going onto the NBN yet, is suddenly really good and really consistent and solid, which it hasn't been for months and months.
Maybe
probably,
everyone
I
else
don't
is
know.
on the NBN and you've just got like a dedicated connection.
And that's what I was we were theorizing at work, was the fact that maybe everyone else has left and you just got this huge pipe that's feeding straight into your
and
house.
you're going to get on the NBN and it's just going to be a nightmare again.
So what that's meant is I've gotten up the guts to try ranked games with my favorite video game, where I normally had a ping that just simply wouldn't allow me to be competitive at all. So I've just been doing that non-stop.
I can understand.
Oh, I did, however, and this is a little bit. This is interesting. The movie Annihilation.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, it didn't. They wouldn't release it at the Australian cinemas, so it's come out straight to Netflix. So I got to watch that last night. And that's
okay.
still in cinema release in the
No,
US.
it didn't get a international release. What happened was Paramount Studios were a bit nervous about the film because the ending was non-traditional Hollywood action style stuff. So they requested.
There's only 3
Well,
weeks to
so
go.
to counter their potential losses, they sold the international rights to Netflix, and it's been a huge success for them. Netflix, that is.
Yeah. Well, I watched it. It was a good movie.
I really liked it. I mean, one thing it's just really well done. It starts off a bit of a fairy kingdom thing, and by the end of it, it's just so fucking alien and bizarre, and you can't work out motivations for things. And I really loved all of that, and it just ends on a what does it all mean note.
Well, I know the Nerdist was sort of purporting that it had Lovecraftian overtones.
It does by the end, yeah.
A little bit, yeah. In that you can't know anything's whatever's happening. You can't know its particular rationale or its.
Well, and people are slowly going mad as well,
Or if it even has a rationale or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's
Could you
really
pick the cultists?
No
No,
cultists.
there's no cultists, not like that. Well,
But there are doppelgangers, and people. It's about genetic manipulation. So people's DNA starts getting swapped with the DNA of other things around them, plants, animals,
not just swapped. All the DNA is basically being flattened so that everything has the same DNA.
Yeah.
As you get closer to the singularity, and it's an interesting idea. I'm wondering whether it'll get the sequel because it's part of a series of books.
It is. There's 3 books. Yeah.
3 books, and
But
from what I understand, this has perhaps elements
yeah.
of the other 2 books, but I'm not sure. I've never read them.
Well, the
And
book
I don't know if the
doesn't
first
include.
book.
You know how by the end of it, how do I not spoil this? There's a fire, right?
It
There's no
becomes
fire in a
resolved in
book.
a certain
There's
way.
no fire in the book.
There's a certain amount of resolution in the end on something, but I'm not sure if that happens in the book. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know, but it'll be interesting. I for one would love to watch a sequel.
Well, see, from what I remember, I was watching a couple of reviews about the series, and there was one particular nerd who was right into it, and they watched the movie and read all the books. The second book in the series takes place entirely outside of the Shimmer, and so
takes place in that base they were at the start.
I thought they were also talking about it taking place in essentially corporate America as well, when all this is becoming apparent, and there's a story being told there as well. But I don't know. It sounded interesting, but ironically, they said that was the weakest book in the trilogy. So,
well, I mean, I'm interested to see what they do with it. I just love the fact that Netflix is providing an avenue for cinema that studios like Paramount otherwise wouldn't release here.
So there must have been some mathematics that went into it, and they said, "Tell you what, if you give it to us international release and it's not released at the cinemas, it's worth this much to us, and therefore we'll give you this much." You know what I mean? There was possibly bargaining behind it, and they went, "Yeah, well, actually, you know what? That sounds pretty good." And instead of risking taking it all internationally, which
from
what I
understand, the studio went to the director and they said, "We need you to change the ending." What do you call it? Test audiences didn't like it, and he basically said, "No, I'm not doing that. There'll be no reshoots." And then so they sold the international rights to Netflix because they didn't think it was going to go very well.
It's also interesting to note, just because it's a success on Netflix doesn't mean it would have been a success in the international release in cinemas.
Not necessarily. I agree.
And I think that's a good part.
I just think this is a good enough movie. It would have been.
Maybe.
And internationally, I mean, I think it would have done fine.
You know, I mean,
I think the Netflix audience is different to the cinema audience.
Yes.
I agree. What I saw was a good movie, and I thought it would do rather well.
I think it was fantastic. Yeah.
I think their reluctance was misplaced. That's all.
I think it did well on Netflix though because it was a bit sort of Stranger Things like it really found an audience by being on the same broadcast network where that lived.
You know, it's fair to say it's probably like the Adam Sandler chain of movies that don't do so well in cinema do excellently in Netflix, or is that a dangerous sort of analogy to sort of, am I casting the wrong sort of aspersion there?
That shade at Natalie Portman. She's a tough enough actress. Put up with that. I mean, she was in the Star Wars prequels. She can act shit if she needs to. She's great in this. Jennifer Jason Leigh is great too. Actually, the whole cast is great. My favorite character was the bear. The bear put on a pretty damn good show.
Yeah, that was creepy as fuck.
It takes the cake for being the creepiest piece of cinema I've seen in a long time. Award to the bear.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't been that adventurous in my viewing taste. I'm reflecting my middle-agedness by watching Grand Designs. A little bit sad, really.
I like Grand Designs. I got to admit, I enjoy Grand Designs.
It is on Netflix.
It's the ultimate. This is the ultimate first world problems show. It's the ultimate in first world problems. There's all these incredibly wealthy people building incredibly iconic sort of homes and stuff like that, and just the trials and tribulations they go through.
But it's nice to watch them sort of fail sometimes too, you know. When they bite off way more than they can chew, and it doesn't all go to according to plan.
There have definitely been a few that went that way. Yeah.
I've yet to see any of the houses not being complete. Very few have. Where they've not been able to move into something. I've never seen an episode where they go.
It goes back a year later and they're still basically trying to finish it.
Yeah, but there's never been an episode where they go, "It's all gone to shit. The council didn't approve it. You had to tear it down." Waiting for that episode, hasn't been delivered yet.
Did you ever see the one where he didn't fail, but you could see it had actually broken him? It was the one where I think it was in where's the market? Is it Canterbury Markets or? Anyway, one area there, and it was this little wedge of land that was down the back of all these other houses. So you had a narrow access way to it, and you basically had a ring of old terraced houses around you, and you had this wedge in the middle of it. And the kind of engineering you had to go through to get that working and to adhere to everything, he was just a broken man at the end.
Yes, I did see that one. He had to pretty much rent about a dozen backyards along the way.
That's right, because they had to tear down all their fences.
Yeah.
configuration of the certain part of the build,
Wow.
and it was just incredibly expensive, and you could see he was busted.
Yes, I watched an episode just like that last night, where near the end of the project, he discovered that there were no utilities to his to his plot. So he finished the building, and when he went to connect the utilities, none there.
No water.
They had to spend £40,000 connecting the property up.
Wow.
And that's the sort of thing that just breaks you, makes you hate your house.
Yeah.
Yeah, Grand Designs. Yeah, it's a guilty pleasure, but definitely that's the ultimate in first world problem.
It is, undoubtedly. I did see there was a new documentary that got released on Netflix, and I haven't had the chance to watch it, but the trailer looked really good. And this is something that's not dear to my heart, but it reminds me of our childhood because it covers the Orange people. And basically, and they had a presence in Fremantle when I was as a child, and I remember them being around. And the one particular female, I can't remember her name, but she was famous forevermore for doing the 60 Minutes interview where she just said tough titties. And
I can't remember her last name.
But this documentary doesn't cover the Australian aspect of the Orange people, but it covers when what was his name, Bajwani or something like that, bought
Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh.
Yes, he bought some land in a small town in America, and it covers what went down there and how they became armed, and how it looks really interesting. Wow. So I'm gonna.
I mean, because I remember they made a big deal of it here, but they were buying up pockets of land all over the place. I mean, all over the world. So it was just because Australia has this inferiority complex, we just jumped all over these poor people when they came in. I mean, all they were doing was buying some land that they were going to live on. I admit there was a bit of a scam going on with the way they ripped off their people as they came into the cult.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to watching that. It looks pretty good.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. I mean, to be fair, most cults rip people off, Jason, so it's not.
It's true. Yeah, that's what I mean. They seemed like they were attracting a lot more attention than they really deserved.
Are you picking on them because they're brown cults?
Yeah.
How about you, Jason? Any culture snippets? Any
well,
memes?
Was that big thing. As I said, it's been all computer games, hardcore laddering.
Well, there's been 2 elections. I've been watching that
on Netflix.
Probably not as exciting as video games on Netflix.
No, not nearly. But
well, one of them was held in the seat of Batman, Jason. What's not exciting about that?
So what happened with that? Did the Greens come up a winner, or is that still going?
Nope.
Last I heard, Labor was ahead on that.
Labor's won. Labor's got it, yeah.
Because I heard in the Labor lost South Australia and the font is gone.
Yeah. By not signing a preference deal with Nick Xenophon, they basically screwed them both. Whereas if they had a preference each other, they would have kept control, maybe with a coalition or something.
Yeah. Nobody won in that one.
Unlucky. So what's the Labor guy that got elected in Batman? What's he like? Is he? I
have a sneaking suspicion he is Batman, Jason.
So he's a right-wing Labor then.
Well, is Batman right-wing?
Yeah, for sure.
He's not like the Tony Stark kind of.
He's pretty authoritarian.
Yes.
Well, I guess okay.
He's not progressive.
Well, I don't know enough about Mr. Keeney.
I've never seen Batman have a sit down and chinwag with the people he's about to attack and going, well, what have you been through? How can I help you be a better person? How can I make you? What can I do for you to fulfill your life's achievements?
Well, I mean, I'm assuming they were pretty worried it was going to fall to the Greens. To be fair, North Melbourne would have been easy for it to go, but it didn't in the end. So, sort of disappointing. I mean, the Libs didn't even field a senator. That's how left-wing senator didn't even field a candidate. That's how left-wing this seat is. And I mean, I'm curious what the good people of South Australia are going to do now that the coalition are in charge.
In what regard?
They seem to be. Well, I mean, they seem to be doing all right. I mean, the coalition hasn't been in power there for 16 years, and they seem to be doing all right with Elon Musk getting involved and putting in batteries and stuff, and sort of bleeding edge technology. I kind of thought that would be the kind of thing you'd want to keep going.
Well, I wonder if Elon's worried about his contracts. I hope he got him locked down to some extent.
I imagine he did.
Politicians are notorious for allowing rich businessmen to actually get the lockdowns in their favour.
Yes, they really are.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jay Weatherall's out, and apparently he's going to stand down from leading the party. So
yes, he's stated he has no interest in federal politics, no desire, and going to just refocus his attention to his electorate from the backbench.
Yeah.
Did he say anything about sniping?
I don't know if he's the kind of person to snipe. He's not really your Tony Abbott.
I'm pretty sure he was showing off a
Barnaby
receipt
Joyce
for a brand new scope.
Well, I mean, if you leave on your own terms, I suppose the motivation to snipe's not really there. It's more if you get turfed out where sniping.
He wasn't on his own terms. He lost an election.
He did, but
he decided to lose.
I think it's sort of etiquette to sort of stand down after you lose election, as you haven't necessarily been turfed out by your own party.
True, but no, that's my anyway. That's my little bits of culture. It was just that and Annihilation.
Well, I do have one small bit of cultural development that sort of grabbed me this week. It seems that all that was old is new again. Torture is back in, baby.
Oh, that sounds unpleasant.
There's, with all the crazy shuffling going on over in America with Trump's cabinet and basically anyone who works for him.
I want to talk about that in detail. There's some crazy stuff that's happening.
Yeah. But one in particular is, I think it's Christine Haspel, who was it's well known. She headed up a black site in Thailand and was very much a practitioner of torture.
Whoa, Joseph, got to stop you there. Obama said we're turning the page on that. So that's in the past. We turned the page, Jason.
Yep, we turned the page. Yeah, she's the new head of CIA. So she shattered that glass ceiling, the first woman head of the CIA, but she happens to be a torturer. That's just unfortunate.
Yeah, well, is it unfortunate with the CIA? I'm not trying to cast aspersions on all of the members of the CIA, but come on.
No, but we can cast aspersions on this one.
No, I am casting aspersions on all of them. I'm suggesting that most of them are not nice people.
And when Obama decided to turn the page, that's exactly what it allowed. These kind of people just still there.
And we'll never know exactly what they got up to because they destroyed the evidence of what they have been up to.
Thing. She was directly responsible for signing off on destruction of evidence.
I know, it's shameful. These people who allegedly supported these programs, yet when it comes to scrutinising them, oh no, we're going to destroy the tapes because that's how much we back what we were doing.
Yeah, it's a pretty douche move. Mind you, maybe all of this will end in a heap soon enough anyway.
Well, hopefully she still has to be confirmed, but...
Well, the interesting thing is, of what they burnt, they actually acknowledged quite heinous things, so you've got to imagine, what were they trying to hide?
Yeah, that was the light stuff.
Yeah.
Like, can't burn all the evidence. We'll just burn the bad stuff. These ones, they're not so bad. This is the sugar-coated Frosties on top of...
Well, it's even crazy, but the whole waterboarding torture discussion has come up again. As part of this, it's like I really thought we'd settled that, but
I think they don't want to admit that they're the bad guys.
No doubt, but we pretty much got to the point where they, it was a consensus in America they should have done something about the torture, and the people had done it. However, they didn't, and now it's just swinging back, and they go, well, maybe it's okay.
I mean, I find most Americans get pretty crazy sometimes when certain things hit the newspapers and they just lose any semblance of being reasonable people. Hysterical is the word I would use to describe them as a country.
I was reading some interesting interesting article describing how a lot of these people like Hasbly, is that what her name is, or whatever, a lot of those who were involved in the torture are now using the Nuremberg defense. I was just following orders, even though the Americans in Nuremberg did not accept that as a defense.
Sorry, just correcting that.
Yeah, so the likes of Gina Haspel were using the Nuremberg defense, which was never accepted, but apparently now it's okay. If you're American using the Nuremberg defense, it's okay, but if you're a Nazi, no.
Yeah.
That sounds like a lot worse when I put it that way, doesn't it? I don't accept the defense from either of those parties.
It's already pretty bad, but even some of the American and British reactions to the nerve gas attack on UK soil were pretty extreme within less than 24 hours of that.
That whole thing. I mean, you've been watching a build-up of resentment against Russia for the last few years. Probably reaching our notice, I guess, when all the Ukrainian sort of interference started happening on both sides. That was when I started paying attention, anyway. But now in Georgia,
with seizing southern Ossetia, that probably was The first
Yeah,
time.
I must admit that had happened a few years before, and I must admit I hadn't really noticed. It was one of those things. Oh, Russia's done another shitty thing in the south of its country, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then, when America started interfering in Ukraine, and you could, because I didn't think America would go to war over Georgia.
No.
Whereas when America started fiddling with elections in Ukraine, right on Russia's doorstep, I think, well, this could possibly end really badly.
Yeah. So the Russians interfered with the American elections.
But now, yeah. So, and within moments, I mean, and Corbyn sort of stood up in Parliament and said, maybe we need to assess the evidence before we go hurling accusations around and things like that.
Yeah, he got booed.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Just for saying, hey, maybe we don't want to rush into these things.
Whoa, ding, 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 ding.
Be Russian,
I love that pun.
Right?
Did you see the BBC mock-up where they photoshopped his hat?
No.
They photoshopped his hat to make it look like one of those Russian bearskin hat type things.
Oh, Rusty Corbyn.
It's fucking and that's the BBC. That's not even a fucking tabloid doing that.
I mean, if you take a step back, you just wonder, why would Russia go to the elaborate method of using a highly dangerous nerve agent, which could obviously be...
implicates them.
Exactly. It's so easy to kill someone, you'd think, for a nation state using very simple methods.
I was listening to the Guardian podcast about this, and they were talking about, and one of the people, they briefly entertained the idea that, well, there are all these stockpiles of nerve agents and things in various odd small Soviet nations that weren't always maintained very well. And who knows who's got their hands on some of this stuff. And all it would take is, sure, one of the Russian oligarchs could get hold of this kind of thing. I mean, they're probably well placed to get hold of it if they wanted it.
Yeah, I mean, from what I understand, though, those were mostly made in Moscow. But I sent you guys an email during the week where the inventor of it now lives in New Jersey. He fled during the Cold War and has been accepted by the Americans. And there was an article in the paper. He's like, no one will be able to reproduce this. It has to be the Russians. And when I was reading this, I was like, I feel like you could reproduce this. No one? For sure. I mean, no one other than maybe you and any of the scientists who are in the room or anyone they've talked to, or but certainly you could.
Yeah, we're supposed to believe that the Americans don't have the capability to produce some really heinous fucking nerve agent.
And the other
especially
part
if someone else has already managed to figure out how to do it.
Yeah. The other part that bugged me was, I don't trust British intelligence after the Iraq War when they were like, no, we're sure they've got WMDs, we guarantee it. It's like, yeah. And now you guarantee it was the Russians? Guarantee? I feel like what? Like you guaranteed the safety of this spy in your country? Like, guarantees don't seem to be that good.
And once again, the calls for anyone who calls for, hey, let's just take a second, just take a minute to think about things, they're immediately branded as assisting the enemy. And it's fucking crazy stuff.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned.
I mean, the way they keep sort of basically trolling each other, both sides. I mean, Russia's not blameless. They were fucking around in the American elections as well.
Yeah.
But if they keep trolling themselves, they're going to troll themselves into something serious one day.
I mean, it's already kind of serious. If you start kicking out diplomats that you say were spies or whatever, and then Russia responds by kicking out diplomats.
I'm not sure. When was the last time something like that was done? Say in...
the Cold War, I think, was the last time that Britain kicked out that many in one hit.
I think there was a more recent episode where the English accused Russia of spying through their embassy in England. So I think there was a mass kick out back then.
That's what embassies really are for, don't you? Though.
Well, yeah, but you're not meant to get caught. That's the trick.
Yeah, I know, really. It's like
it's poor form.
Oh my God, your diplomats are spying. Really? Fucking really? And yours aren't.
Well, we had the good manners not to get caught.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's making Theresa May look strong. It's resonating with all the right-wing nut
you're
jobs
right. You're exactly right. It's something that she's been able to latch onto and play and solidify things a little bit by being a bit of a hard ass about it.
I'm just hopeful that Europe doesn't get dragged along with England.
But then once again, it's so disturbing knowing that there's politicians that are so weak in their position that they're willing to do this kind of thing just to fucking shore up their domestic situation and shit like that.
Yeah, it's literally crazy.
And let's put a little bit of context here, because like obviously Theresa May's gone out and thinks she can look good at home by saying that Putin's a bad man. But I don't think Putin's too worried, because if Putin was worried, he's demonstrated that he can do stuff like fly strategic nuclear bombers just along the side of Great Britain, just saying, hey, look, I can do this if I want to, and nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about this I find interesting is Vladimir Putin's not the kind of guy to say it wasn't me when it was him. Generally speaking, he normally says, if you do this, I'm going to do that, and then you do whatever it is. And he immediately responds, you're like, whoa, that's a bit hard-ass. And it's like, no, he said he fucking was going to do it. It seems really unlike him to be like, it wasn't me. Pulling the Shaggy defense? I don't see Vladimir Putin doing a duet with Shaggy.
I mean, this is the guy that walked into Crimea and said, yep, I got it. Yeah. It's mine. What are you going to do about it?
Well, it helps when you've got a massive Russian population embedded there to be able to do that sort of walk in.
Yeah, I feel like if you really were a Russian secret agent wanting to take someone out, guns, knives, cars.
Well, I mean, they do have a slight history. I mean, unless it was something, that polonium incident was another false flag.
No, I don't think that one was. It's just this.
You know what I mean? It's not out of the realms of possibility. It just seems so ridiculously unlikely and
the only thing this would ever serve is if you want to send a message to anyone else who's ever going to betray you, don't fucking do it because I will get you.
Yeah, I think that message is out there already.
That's what I would think. Yeah, that's like. The guy's a low value target now. Like he's an old man. Like there's nothing to be gained from this.
Yeah.
I saw one news article which was suggesting that the target was potentially the daughter, who was apparently dating the son of a high-ranking Russian army something or other, and it went sour. So this was a retribution deal.
Yeah, I saw the same thing, where the mother basically forbade the son from marrying this daughter of a traitor.
Yes. That seems highly plausible when you think about it, because obviously, poisoning people is highly personal.
I mean, to be fair, suggesting it was Vladimir Putin's not implausible either. It's like, I can see him doing it, but not on the verge of an election, not like, I don't know.
Right now, crime of passion sounds about as plausible as the fact that the actual Russian government did it.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about
and then the UK's unwillingness to cooperate with them in any way is a bit,
Yeah, it's fucking
rich
bizarre.
as well.
Well, it doesn't make for good optics domestically.
The daughter, Yulia, if I'm saying it right, she's a Russian citizen and she was murdered in a foreign country. They're like asked to see the evidence and being told no. That seems a bit like a dick move. I understand the father's a traitor, but the daughter's still a citizen of Russia. You're supposed to cooperate.
Yeah, that's pretty fair. That's an interesting context. That's exactly right. I mean, any other nation would expect some kind of cooperation.
And but the interesting thing about this for me has been a lot of the reactions in America. Almost anyone that's come out and said, something bad about Russia, Trump's been getting rid of. Now it could just be, happenstance that he was going to fire them anyway, but it's odd. Very odd.
Well, yeah, and I mean, this just feeds into the anti-Russia hysteria that's over there right now.
I mean, to be fair, one of them's Rex Tillerson, which obviously he had previously called Donald Trump a fucking moron in a Pentagon meeting. So I can understand that maybe that one was not about Russia. That was just more about not liking being called a fucking moron because you have the ego of size of an elephant and the intellect of a fucking ant. But yeah, very odd. Can I segue to America?
Segue away.
So did you see that Trump fired the former deputy director of the FBI, Andy McCabe?
Yes, just before he was about to get his retirement. 2 days before. What a dick move.
Yeah, before his 50th birthday, a couple of days beforehand, when he would have been eligible for a pension. You're fired.
Dick move.
And the knife was delivered by none other than Jeff Sessions as well, which I thought was kind of funny, because Jeff Sessions is also on the chopping block.
Yes, well, I think
publicly known to be on the chopping block as well.
I think Jeff's hands probably would have been forced on that one, because he's the only one who can actually fire Mr. McCabe. And so
he could have just recused himself again, like he did with the original Russia.
Could have, maybe.
Yeah, but it just seemed like a very vindictive attack, with Trump out to just do as much damage to potential.
Completely in character, though, isn't it?
As possible.
Completely in character.
Yeah, there was a couple of interesting tweets I saw in response to Trump's sacking of him, an announcement over on Twitter. So the former director of the CIA, John Brennan, posted this: "When the full extent of your venality, moral turpitude, and political corruption becomes known, You will take your rightful place as a disgraced demagogue in the dustbin of history. You may scapegoat Andy McCabe, but you will not destroy America. America will triumph over you," which I thought was quite nice, well written for an angry man. And then James Comey also posted a response on Twitter, which I thought was funny. "Mr. President, the American people will soon hear my story, and they can judge for themselves who is honorable and who is not." Which is just a very not so thinly veiled threat.
Yeah, I read those and I thought they were well worded and they sounded great, but I fear that there's a large percentage of the American population that doesn't give a shit.
Yeah.
They just don't care.
What, did you read any of the responses to them? Because they are just flooded with Donald Trump supporters responses.
Yeah, look,
hope you enjoyed being in jail soon.
Twitter is such a toxic environment these days. I'm not even sure anyone other than people that are on Twitter are paying that much attention to this anymore.
I'm sure everyone's paying attention to Trump, but
yeah, he's get some volume, but the rest of it, Twitter's just such a garbage carnival. It's crazy.
I mean, all we can hope. Sorry, go on.
No, you go.
I was going to say, all we can hope is that through Donald Trump's alleged machinations, he'll end up like Richard Nixon and inevitably be brought to justice.
And then get pardoned.
Whatever gets him off the stage.
Not pardoned, you know.
Well, Nixon got pardoned, so you know.
Well, he eventually got pardoned by Gerald Ford.
I don't think you want presidents in jail. It's not a good look.
No.
That's like admitting as a country
we need to put a couple in jail.
Stooged.
Maybe we need to put a few in jail.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you. I think it's, you know.
Well, where do you start though?
Maybe that's what it'll take. Putting a few in jail, and then
apparently McCabe has had an interview with James Comey though, and that the 3 days where he served as acting director of the FBI and was meeting daily with the president, he turned over all of his notes and diaries from that period of time to the special counsel. So, you know, assuming that Trump doesn't find a way of shutting him down before they bring their case forward, he may end up being a critical individual in that.
Oh. I had another interesting theory. The Donald Trump Jr. divorce that's going ahead. The fact that they announced the divorce the day after, and it was a divorce that was going to be signed off in sort of amicable terms very quickly, a fast track divorce kind of thing. So assets could be sort of
money. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. No, that's I thought the same thing when I read it, and then when people posted that theory, I was like, "I'm with you."
That sounds fine.
Sounds exactly like what's happening.
These are things that Trump would be aware of, I'm sure. How to safeguard money.
Yeah, I have no doubt that that's about safeguarding some of the cash. But yeah, what are you going to do? I mean, surely it seems really hard to call him out on a divorce. And if Donald Trump Jr. does get in legal hot water, I'd be happy enough just seeing him get in hot water.
I would not be up at night worrying about that.
I think it would break Trump a little bit.
Seeing Trump Jr. in hot water?
In jail. I mean, he'd probably try and pardon him, I guess, but...
well, within his rights to do so as president?
Yeah, damn it.
You know who I'm worried about?
He also acts the National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, which I thought was, with Tillerson being gone and then the National Security Advisor being gone, it's a pretty bold move. Considering you're just talking about meeting with North Korea to discuss potential peace agreements, and you're just getting rid of all these senior diplomats. All kinds of crazy at the moment in the Trump White House.
Are they replacing those people with Fox anchor people? I've heard that sort of mentioned. Has that actually come to pass?
Well, the new head of the replacement for Tillerson obviously is the former head of the CIA. I don't know about the National
Pompeo.
Security. Yeah.
Well, no, he's not a ex-Fox anchor person.
No, I know. Sorry, I mean he's replacing Tillerson, but I don't know about the other roles. Maybe they are.
Oh, God, help us.
I mean, they're getting that far down the list. Who knows?
I wish we had started a game of bingo at the start of this Trump presidency 14 months ago, with little faces for all his initial staff members, just so we could have played through to see who would have won. It would have been quite good.
As I was saying, you know who I'm worried about in the Trump orbit? You know, sometimes you've got to worry about the little people. And the little person I'm worried about at the moment is Stormy Daniels. Trump, who denies any allegation that he's entered an agreement or had any illicit affairs with one Stormy Daniels, has unleashed the lawyers upon her, particularly who I find particularly nasty character is the lawyer who defended Hulk Hogan against Gorka. What's his name? Charles Harder. So Melania Trump used Charles Harder to prosecute, was it BuzzFeed? No, not BuzzFeed. Well, one of those publications. And
BuzzFeed could probably deserved it, to be fair, but...
And a internet troll who accused Melania of being a professional escort rather than a model on her entry into the US. Now, that's obviously, well, I don't know, but I would assume that is a fabrication and not the truth. But Charles Harder is a particularly nasty individual, and I was very horrified when I watched the documentary about how he actually, well, he was funded by Peter Thiel to prosecute the Hulk Hogan case. But anyway, he's been brought on to pursue Stormy Daniels for breaches of the NDA or the confidentiality agreement to the tune of $20 million for 20 breaches. Not quite sure why you'd get yourself involved with a non-disclosure agreement where you're, for only $100,000, you're agreeing to pay $1 million for breaches.
Yeah. I mean, it's not even the kind of money you could do a GoFundMe page for,
no.
is it?
Well, she has done a GoFundMe, and she's raised about $200,000 to for her, not for her defense, but she's trying to get out of the non-disclosure agreement.
Yeah.
And she offered to give the money back, but that's not how these things work. You can't just offer the money back to get out of these agreements. But it is interesting, and I fear that she's going to get stomped. And Trump will come off unscathed, even though it's beyond a joke now. It's obvious that he's had an affair with Stormy Daniels. The exact details we're not quite sure on, but...
Don't need to be really sure on those details,
no,
to be honest.
There's something going on, even though he's denying it. But yet we're having this whole charade where he's allowed to unleash lawyers without having to admit it for something he's not admitting. So why are you defending something that you admit never happened? It just seems ridiculous. And he'll get away with it in the end.
Well, conservative Republicans don't seem to really mind anyway.
Well, that's the thing. Well,
everyone seems to be okay with this sort of premarital affair for some reason.
Well, except one individual, and this is where I've heard some speculation, particularly, well, where I've heard it from is the Majority Report. The speculation being is that perhaps there's a prenup agreement that might sting Donald Trump if this actually came to pass and it was proven that he indeed had an affair with Stormy Daniels.
Yeah, it might actually cost him money.
I would have thought if you were marrying Donald Trump in the prenup, you would be like, you can't have sex with me more than once a year. You can sleep with anyone you want. But I don't have to put up with that shit.
Who knows?
Just
but
eye candy on the side.
It's just been interesting the way he's handled this particular case, because usually he's quite happy to go on the offensive on Twitter. We've not seen anything from Donald Trump on Twitter regarding Stormy Daniels.
Maybe the agreement is that he can have affairs, but they just can't be public. They can't be made public, and if they are, then there's a penalty. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, I would like that.
I'd be okay with that as well. I'd be like, look, you can do what you want, just keep it a secret.
Yeah.
I don't want to look like a dickhead.
Don't drag me through the fucking mud with you.
Which he doesn't seem to have abided by.
Well, maybe there's just an anti-Stormy Daniels clause, you know? So you fuck anyone you want. You cannot fuck Stormy Daniels. Find out you have, it's going to cost you.
That bitch owes me $50.
Yeah.
But I'd imagine Stormy, well, she probably doesn't quite... Well, she might even realise how much trouble she's in, particularly because that particular lawyer is on the case. And he hasn't really lost any cases when it comes to this sort of bullying.
Yeah, maybe there's also a point where she just doesn't give a shit. She's just like, oh, well, I fucked up. I'm going to lose everything I've got and declare bankruptcy. I may as well just keep talking then. Because surely there becomes a point where you're like, oh, well.
I don't know if you'd... I don't know. I can't speak for other people, but I don't know if I'd be as... stoic in the face of total economic bankruptcy.
Well, no, but I mean, maybe you realize it's already happened or something. There's a point where she's like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. I'm already fucked.
Maybe. I hope for a better outcome, but I fear that what will happen is she'll get stomped and nothing will come to pass, and Trump will move on.
Trump just gets undone for the Russia side of things, and this just goes away because he's got other shit to worry about.
Well, what will make me happy is if Mr. Mueller decides to interview Stormy Daniels, because there's, considerations that perhaps campaign funding laws may have been inadvertently broken.
Really? Was this a recent thing where she slept with him?
Well, it's the way they paid him.
Yes.
They paid Stormy Daniels via his lawyer who got the money from campaign funds or something.
Yeah.
There's possibly some weirdness in the way they actually paid her off.
Yes.
Like Trump certainly didn't pay her directly.
Fair enough. Didn't want it to be traceable.
So whatever reason, he did not pay her directly, and there's questions over where the money came from. And
the defense, and it seems utterly ridiculous, is that Cohen paid out of his own pocket because he's such a good mate, and Trump didn't know about it, and he was just standing up for his, stand-up mate.
I have seen that, where he did say, I have seen that on the internet, that the lawyer alleges he paid for it himself.
Yeah, that's the kind of case where someone just is blatantly lies to you and says, "Go on, prove me wrong."
Yeah.
Can't.
It makes you sick to the stomach that are individuals that do that sort of shit.
Well, what makes me sick to the stomach is I don't have a friend who's a lawyer who would do that for me. I feel like I need a mate who would pay a $100,000 bribe to someone without being prompted.
Not even bother telling me.
Well, because that would incriminate me. See, if I don't know, I haven't done anything wrong.
He understands plausible deniability, our fictional lawyer.
Yeah. Fictional lawyer, bro.
Now, are we done with international news? Are we going to talk about the fat potato elephant that's in domestic
that's
regions?
Still international, really, but yes. Yes, we are.
For whatever reason, the Venerable Peter Dutton, Home Affairs Minister,
I'd like to point out for a second, can we please start referring to Barnaby Joyce as the Minister for Affairs?
Yep.
Potato. I was going to say Peter Potato.
Sorry to just throw you off there.
Potato Dutton.
For no reasons that came out of nowhere with we need to take more white refugees in. Unprompted. Prompted by a certain...
When we took the Syrian refugees, he was insisting we take Christian Syrians above any other kind of Syrians for who knows what reason, which seemed a little odd at the time.
I'm inclined to agree with Peter Dutton on this and say, look, let's put all these white South Africans in a leaky boat and make them get over the Indian Ocean in a really shitty boat. And if they make it here, they're in.
What if we just stuff them below decks of a wooden ship in numbers far exceeding safe transit, and then just whoever lives gets here and then is in indentured servitude? What about that?
Wow, that's taking a little bit further than I was willing to do. But why not? White slavery.
Look, I mean, what I find most, I'm going to probably say disgusting about this, is that Peter Dutton is a man that shed no tears for the plight of the Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar and the rumors of ethnic cleansing. That doesn't bother his potato-powered heart in the slightest. But white farmers having some land redistributed away from them to black farmers to counter historical wrongs, all of a sudden that bugs him.
That's it. This is a bridge too far, Dean.
Yeah, it's just fucking weird.
Actually,
it makes him come off a bit white power, doesn't it? Like a bit.
Yeah.
I mean, you always knew he was right wing, but
very much. Just a little aside on that Myanmar thing. How disappointed must people be in Aung San Suu Kyi? I can't even pronounce the name right. Where a couple of years ago she was being feted as this amazing human rights. Yeah, and then the moment she gets out and gets into power, she's doing the same shit.
Yep.
You know, the problem with Nobel Peace Prizes is, in general, they just get issued to random people that don't deserve them. This isn't the first time that's happened. It's just like, what the fuck? Why did you give her an award?
And it's notable that the last time it happened, it was Barack Obama.
Yeah, just for being elected. Oh, he's brought peace to America by being elected.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, back to Potato Dutton and his white power.
And we're picking on Peter, but there's actually been a lot of lobbying for other ministers on this whole issue. So we had Andrew Pasty, as I like to call him, agitating for this. So the South African community in, particularly in WA, but I'm sure in some of the other states, have been agitating agreeable MPs. Ian Goodenough, another advocate for this, for the plight of white minority farmers in South Africa for this.
You know, my favourite thing about Ian is his last name. Because I often feel like my politicians simply don't have what it takes to do the job. But Ian's good enough.
So this has been bubbling under the surface.
Ian's electorate has the largest percentage of South African voters in Western Australia, by the way.
Yeah.
Which is not surprising that we'd be agitating for this.
Yeah. Well, we can understand why Andrew Pasty has an ear willing to listen to this plight, as opposed to the Rohingya minority in Burma or Myanmar.
Yeah, no, he wouldn't want to help Muslims.
What this has also started was me to have idiotic conversations with conservatives about this and why it's hypocrisy and so forth.
Well, how could they say it's not hypocrisy?
Well, they don't really care. So it's like, but don't you understand that these people are being victimized and so forth? And and it's always difficult to unpack this because you sort of try to explain that. Well, it's actually quite a complicated situation. What's going on in South Africa? So basically, you've got someone that's just come into power that was brought in to accelerate land redistribution, but also realizes that if you do that, you could destabilize your agricultural economy and end up like Zimbabwe. So there's a lot of things going on. It's not as simple as it's made out to be in A Current Affair and by Pete and Data. And with these sorts, I don't broach the whole hypocrisy because that's of no interest to them when it becomes.
No, I wouldn't either. But I mean, surely anyone who has even the vaguest of ideas about the history of South Africa would understand that the indigenous black people maybe are a little dispossessed of land, and that it's not the worst thing in the world if some sort of redistribution happens to make it more fair.
Well, they tend to focus on unverified, and it may well be happening. I don't know, but they seem to. They take it as good as gold from Peter Dutton and A Current Affair that white farmers being terrorised unilaterally.
It's interesting because I've got some stats actually. It turns out, and this is going to shock you, but being a young black man living in poor urban areas like Kalatisha or Lange, you have a far greater risk of being murdered. In fact, your rate is something like 300 per 100,000 versus the worst case 133 per 100,000 of farmers in general. That includes blacks and whites.
I'm not shocked by that, to be honest.
It's factually incorrect.
Yeah. Once again, not being a middle-class white conservative, I am not shocked by those statistics.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost true, unfortunately, across the world that if you live in a society and you're a young black male, you have a higher chance of dying than a white man living next door.
Well, it's this whole notion that all of a sudden we can open the refugee floodgate for people who are victims of general crime as opposed to people that are victims of political crime.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people actually, conservatives believe it's a government conspiracy to terrorise and murder white farmers in South Africa.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, clearly that holds up. That holds water.
Of course it does. Because it suits a narrative that white Australians want to believe in. The idea that the situation may be a tad more complex than that is something that is not digestible.
That is the unfortunate case for modern day news delivered over the internet, though, on Facebook, is that nuance is lost. You just get a soundbite.
New what?
Nuance, yeah. Oh, you're saying, funny.
Do you have any more comments to throw in about Peter Potato?
No more shade to throw at Potato. A little concerning that he potentially is the future of the Liberal Party, though.
I know. There's no one else stepping into the bulwark.
Yeah, even his comments defending himself. So, he says, we want people who want to come here, abide by our laws, integrate into our society, work hard and not lead a life on welfare. The fuck, Pete? Like that, you're describing anyone coming here as a refugee. They're not coming here to live a life on welfare. Fleeing literal ethnic cleansing. I might go live in Australia on welfare.
Can I ask, when he was saying that, was he tapping his nose and winking?
Yeah, motivated people don't, people motivated enough to leave a country and
yeah, they've got their own reasons for leaving, and it's not those, Pete.
And they're not coming here just to lay about. I mean, they're wanting something better.
Yeah. Fucking stooge.
I was having are we finished with Peter, or we got some more?
Yeah. I'm out of stories, by the way.
I decided to speak with Conservative Australia again today.
Ooh,
I don't know why I do this, but decided to talk about how one wants to run their criminal system, and generally the mindset of Conservative Australia is retribution, not a lot of interest in rehabilitation, because we were talking about how the Scandinavian approach, which is very much focused on rehabilitation in general. Although with this particular individual, they're very obsessed about the cultural dynamics or makeup. So it's sometimes a bit hard to use Scandinavia as an example, because they tend to be more homogenous societies. And that they use that as a way to say, oh, well, you can't compare. But
they're never saying why that makes a difference.
Yeah.
Well, hang on. Why can't you compare? Because they have different skin and hair color to people here in Australia.
Yeah. Apparently, if you're
that invalidates the results.
Yeah. I'm not saying it makes any sense, but this is what happens when you engage.
That is their argument.
Yeah. But
you know what? I've heard one of our friends come up with this argument, which surprised the hell out of me as well.
Oh dear.
About that. Which it was just like, I mean, but there's no explanation behind it. There doesn't seem to be anything deeper than that very statement.
This is the first time you haven't done a name drop when you've thrown one of our friends under a bus, and I legitimately have no idea who you're talking about, and it bugs me.
Scoot came up with
okay. Name drop.
Okay.
Moving right along. So I can actually merge into different interactions with Conservative Australians. So I'll keep on with this one, but I'll home back to the other conversation I had is a particular race more predisposed to violence? Craziness. I'll come back to that one. But going back to how do you...
I mean, white Catholics in general are more predisposed towards violence than any other race on the planet. Catholics is probably unfair, but,
Well, if we're going to talk about that...
the Crusades, a lot of the plagues, it's white Christians.
Yeah, well, I tended to advocate that violence and brutality is just inherent in human nature in general. It knows no colour or creed. People, under all in the right circumstances, can be very brutal against each other. This person was trying to advocate that it was in African nature to be more brutal to each other. And I sort of suggested that perhaps if you review history, you'll find that no matter what race or nation you point to, they've all gone through a period where they've been just as brutal to each other. You can just, if you want to point to white people, look at the Baltics, and if you read what happened there, my God, you'll be brought to tears.
Well, there was one of these crazy Scandinavian right wingers that I follow on Twitter was saying that was it no Christians were ever terrorists, no Christian organizations were terrorists, and everyone just sort of jumped on him and dragged him about it. Said, has everyone completely forgotten about the IRA? It was like they just specifically want to make Muslims their stock in trade almost exclusively, which just is. It's like their memory doesn't stretch back even 20 years.
So yeah, that was an interesting conversation. But going back to the criminal system, I was trying to sort of have the discussion about, trying to get a sense of if they could get their heads around. Look, at the end of the day, when you run a criminal system, you have to think about what is the outcome you want in your community on how you run that. So I was trying to advocate, if you focus on rehabilitation, your overall outcomes are going to be better. You will reduce crime. There's always going to be a segment of your community that are going to commit heinous crimes, and it's very difficult to stop that. They're not disincentivized by any particular punishment.
Especially crimes of passion.
Exactly. But if you want to bring, the majority of your petty to semi-serious crime rates down, focusing on retribution just further increases their criminal behaviour. If jails are treated as purely for retribution and as a con college, you don't want criminals coming out even further entrenched in criminal behaviour through a traumatic experience in jail.
Coming out in that instance.
But the individual I was discussing could not get their minds beyond focusing of retribution, and they could never get past the point of, but if someone does this needs to happen to them. It's like, what is the outcome you want? Yes, if you focus on rehabilitation, yes, if you focus on individual cases, some people will get off light-handed. But what is the outcome you inevitably want? But they could never get past the individual punishment.
That is unfortunate. That must have been frustrating for you.
It was a little bit, because every time I tried to get further into what is the outcome overall you want, it just kept on returning back to individual punishments.
Well, I mean, that sounds like that's the outcome you wanted.
Yeah, in the end, yes. Well, this particular individual was advocating that what we should have is an amnesty where people could just shoot people who annoyed them.
Oh, what's this movie's
like
about?
The Purge.
The Purge.
Yes, pretty much. And I suggest
The Purge is fair go. Oh, awesome.
And I suggested that in that scenario, the people that you want to come out on top of that might not be the ones you actually want.
Yeah.
I may have dropped post-apocalyptic world, and they didn't seem to have a problem with that. I must admit, this particular individual is an extremist in the conservative views.
Yeah.
It's interesting, though, that there is this correlation between people who strongly believe in prison as a punishment and then who are also okay with shooting people. Like, they're okay with murder as long as they're doing it. But if someone else is doing it, there's got to be punishment. There can't be any extenuating circumstances. It's odd.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because when the topic of capital punishment comes into play, I always advocate that I'm against it, because the criminal system's fallible, and therefore innocent people can be murdered, and I find that particularly heinous. And they said that's collateral damage. Well, these conservatives I speak to present that that's collateral damage, and they're comfortable with that.
Until it's them or their kids or their wife.
Of course.
And I don't think they're comfortable with it. I just think they don't have a counter argument. So
No.
Dismiss.
It's all about getting that retribution on the individuals that they always go down the path of, what if you can inadvertently prove that this individual did that? And I say, well, it's not about that particular case. It's about all the other cases where it's circumstantial, and yet they're
even in those cases where you can, like say Charles Manson, right? You can prove he did it. I'd still rather he serves his life out in prison and dies an old man. I'd rather he be an example to people of what happens.
Yeah.
Which is, you live a very boring, lonely life in prison with women trying to marry you to take advantage of you.
But even with that, as a disincentive, it doesn't work, because most of those people who commit those crimes are not disincentivized by those punishments. But
I'd still rather that than killing him.
I would advocate that if you put them in jail, if they're found innocent, to some extent you can reverse the punishment, that they're not dead. They can be released.
Well, especially when you look at, like, West Australia, for example, we've had the Nickelback brothers, Andrew Mallard. We've had multiple cases where the cops have just been flat out wrong, and the case has been overturned. So fallibility on behalf of law enforcement, unfortunately, is a reality.
The WA cops seem to be particularly bad at that, don't they? With getting,
I think it's a tough job, but yeah.
No, I mean, these ones were pretty blatant, where they planted evidence and all sorts of crazy stuff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not about being a tough job.
It's tough to defend that. It's tough to defend that.
Well, that's all I've got. What about you, lads?
I'm done as well.
Like it's a wrap.
All right. Hold on the line, boys. I shall just end the stream. Thank you for listening, Australia. I've been Franco. There's also been Dean and Jason.
Wait.